You help me as I'm starting to burn. Too many doses and I'm starting to get an attraction. My confidence is leaving me.
Hello and welcome to another installment of Metallic Reviews, the show where I take an honest look at the harder, heavier side of music and give it an honest rating. Today, we're diving into the grimy underworld of death metal to examine an album by some bona fide legends of the genre. Might I add, it's an album that's been getting a lot of critical acclaim so far. Yes, it's Obituary and their new one, Dying of Everything, released January 13th on Relapse Records. Now, this is Obituary's 11th studio album. Yeah, 11. These guys have been around for a hot minute. It's also their first in 6 years. That's like long gap between albums. Now, their previous record, which was self-titled, received a rather warm reception and was included on Decibel Magazine's list of the 100 best metal albums of the decade. So, how's the follow-up? Let's jump in and find out. Now, right off the bat, you're going to be absolutely just pummeled. That's the only word I can think of. You're going to be pummeled. Obituary is in pummel mode here. Album opener, Barely Alive, is a delicious bit of very beefy death metal, leaving nothing to the imagination. From there, the album doesn't really slow down any. Riffs are numerous and plentiful here as guitarists Trevor Perez and Kenny Andrews guide the listener through a soundscape that honestly pulls as much from the Swedish death metal realm as it does the Florida scene where Obituary was founded. I especially love the tone that they use on here. It's got that Entombed-esque buzzsaw quality while still retaining all of its own roots. Speaking of that, the production on here is top-notch. It definitely falls in with the concept of paying tribute to the old while harnessing the new. Sure, it's got all the bells and whistles you'd expect from a well-known project like Obituary, but it's also wonderfully retro in a lot of ways. In terms of mixing, the album does have its strengths. The aforementioned guitar tone is one, but the manner in which vocalist John Tardy is presented is of particular note. There's a distinct variety in the choices made here, and they all fit the songs that they are on. Some of the vocals are put very high and tight in the mix, blasting you in the face from the get-go, while others are more cavernous. Yeah, they still sit high in the mix, but it's more like a Blood Incantation or Tumult high rather than just that cutting edge right in your face type of high. They are allowed to breathe a bit more depending on what the song requires, and for me, that's a big, big deal. I love the variety. I love the differences between the two styles. The songwriting here is incredibly infectious. It drives home riff after riff, and they're very, very catchy without sacrificing anything in terms of heaviness or overall atmosphere. Now, I'm not going to say this is the thickest slab of death metal I've ever heard, but it's definitely one of the most interesting. And for me, that matters way more than just overall heaviness. A lot of times, I do find that death metal bands will go straight for the jugular in terms of how heavy their projects are, but Obituary temper that here by understanding something about what music is and how to tastefully incorporate heaviness into it. It's very, very well done. The framework of each song on here is incredibly unique, yet it all ties in with the overall nucleus of the record. That's the mark of very good songwriting, and Dying of Everything has it in absolute droves. Performance-wise, you can't really beat Perez and Andrews on here. Again, they draw a ton from that Swedish buzzsaw world. A lot of the tonality on here reminds me of, again, Entombed, Early at the Gates, that kind of thing. But it certainly is not a ripoff. I want to make that clear. It's not a ripoff. It pays tribute. It's a great homage, but it's really not a ripoff. They do away with a lot of the melodically inclined bits of those other projects, replacing it with banging riffs and torturous undertones. However, they don't get rid of the melody entirely. It's very subtle, but it still remains, and it drives the overall structure of each successive track, and it makes it all work very nicely. Each new riff on here is like an adventure, needing to be heard, breathed in, and experienced. There aren't a ton of negatives on here at all, but I do have a couple of setbacks. One is the way the drums are mixed. Drummer Donald Tardy is putting on a heck of a performance behind the kit. You can just tell that from the way that he's moving around and the stuff that you do here. The issue is that the kicks can get buried in the mix at some point. I'd like to have heard them just a little bit more. My other issue lies in some of the lyricism. And not that it's bad per se, but it does get repetitive towards the end of the album. It gets a little chanty, and it could have been done a little more thought could have been put into some of the lyrics here. You know, I know it's death metal and everyone wants it to be campy, cheesy, sarcastic, over the top, whatever. But even within that context, I'd like the brain to be stretched just a little bit more. Other than that, there are no negatives here. Obituary have certainly not gone rusty, even with a 6-year layover between records. I don't think that it's an understatement to say that this is one of the best death metal records I have ever heard. It's got a terrific tone to it, solid production, excellent songwriting, and terrific performances. Top it all off with an excellent album cover by the guy who did the same one for another one of my favorite metal albums of all time, Mirror Reaper by Bell Witch, and you've got an early album of the year contender. I'm giving Dying of Everything a very, very strong 4.5 out of 5. Thanks so much for watching. Click like and do not forget to subscribe for more metallic reviews. Next week, we're going to be veering sharply away from death metal and entering the world of what the Metal Archives describes as gothic/alternative/progressive rock/metal. Yeah, long descriptor, but fitting as we examine Catatonia's new one, Sky Void of Stars. I hope you'll join me. You've been watching Metallic Reviews, where I give honest ratings to honest music. I will see y'all next time.